I saw Roadhouse over the weekend. This is Roadhouse 2024, Jake Gyllenhaal. It made me realize a couple things, or crystallized for me a couple things about what we do, especially in the OSR world where we're going back and looking at older materials and then bringing them forward and oftentimes messing with them as will our wont, but with, I think in everybody, at least certainly my experience and probably your experience too, mixed results, right? Not everything we do works, obviously. Some things can go better, some things can go worse. And this Roadhouse remake just kind of hit that for me. I'm not going to spoil it too much because that's not really about particular plot points. If you've seen the original Roadhouse, the main points are there, though really what I want to get into is you could see how the new movie was really trying to do things that I feel like we do with our games a lot. And I don't think it worked out very well. I feel like I'm beating around the bush, so let me just get into it. When I look at Roadhouse 2024, it seems to me that folks took the writers, and I don't have their names off the top of my head, the writers, producers, sure, took Roadhouse, was it 1989? And looked at all the things that were not realistic. How could this be? This doesn't make any sense. And tried to craft a more realistic, believable version of that movie. Gone is the concept of the cooler, this sort of uber bouncer, right? You had bouncers and you had the coolers, and the coolers were almost like these samurai or ronin who would travel from place to place, bring contentment and peace to the land. In their case, it would be to a bar, and then they'd move on in search of a new challenge. That's gone. Dalton, as this weird kind of monkish warrior type, is also gone. Now there's a tragic backstory, a much more believable background in which Dalton is an MMA fighter. Yes, it doesn't make much sense. Who is this guy who just ripping throats and doing things but seems to come out of nowhere? And now you get this, okay, he's an MMA fighter. We understand where his skills from. We can see how they're trying to build this backstory. But is it any better for it? You take the villain in the original Roadhouse is kind of a big man in the village or town. There's a really neat sort of sub-story, though it's not fleshed out very well, with these kind of four guys or three or four guys who kind of run the town and have their own little quadrants. And the Brad Wesley character was sort of stepping over the other ones, and then it all comes to a head. Of course, the new movie, there's a criminal, but there's a much more, in some ways, much more reasonable sense of why they're doing what they're doing. We only get little hints of it, but you can see it. It's like, okay, it makes more sense. But is the movie better for it? And I think in each instance, the answer is no. The movie's not better for removing the coolers. Yes, coolers don't make any sense. It was goofy. Look, I was a kid back in '89. The cooler was this weird thing that didn't make much sense to me. I wasn't even going to bars yet. But it was just kind of part of the world. I think similar to what John Wick has done with this whole subworld of criminals and how they operate and everything. Roadhouse, way before John Wick, invented this kind of subworld of what's happening with bars and bouncers and coolers. Giving him an MMA background, giving him a tragic backstory, giving that stuff presumably to make him a more relatable character doesn't really help. I didn't feel, well, because I understand this bit about Dalton, that really improves the movie, even though I think if you put me in a room with a bunch of folks and we were there to workshop Roadhouse, we probably would have that same idea too. Hey, let's get rid of coolers. That's goofy. That doesn't make any darn sense. And let's make him an MMA fighter. And let's say, well, the reason he's not fighting it, let's take a page out of The Quiet Man and a whole bunch of movies, and we'll say, okay, some kind of tragedy struck, which caused them to shift gears. Well, what about this Brad Wesley, big bad evil guy character? Doesn't really make much sense. What's he doing all this for? Why are they doing it? Why does he have Bigfoot the monster truck hanging around? Like, what you doing? Let's make this more sensible. Okay, what could this be? Okay, well let's do that. Let's make it a cooler location too. We're gonna go from, I'm not sure they ever say in Roadhouse where exactly the Double Deuce is. Some town in the Midwest or the South. Both, either, doesn't really matter. They move it to the Keys. It's nicer. We have a more beautiful backdrop. Let's move the Double Deuce there. Why are we out in this kind of hillbilly backwoods? Let's move over there. All of these decisions, I think you can reason them out. you can discuss them. And on paper, I think you go, yeah, that's good. But when you lay it all out in the movie, it's a worse movie, even though on paper it makes more sense. The locations are more interesting. All these different things. I could go on and on. They use CGI to, I guess, enhance the fighting. Something on paper probably also thought probably makes a lot of sense. Oh yeah, we can use CGI to make them hit harder, make the punches, everything look more brutal, and we can speed them up, and it can be quick, and we can really express using computer graphics just the speed and power and things that we'd have a hard time really accentuating to show how a Dalton and his nemesis and some of these other guys, how they're just a cut above the rest. Does it make it better? No, I felt myself taken out of those scenes. The first time, I think it was the first fight scene, and I saw their arms and stuff moving in a way that wasn't quite natural. Maybe it's an uncanny valley thing. I don't know. Maybe they just sped them up too much. I don't know. But instinctively, I said I don't know what that is, but I don't like it. And none of the fights seemed as impactful to me because it didn't feel as much like two guys really hitting each other. It felt like there was this gap in between that they were filling in with computer graphics. Another decision that probably on paper looks great. Why am I going on about this, and what the heck does this have to do with tabletop role-playing games and the OSR and other things? A lot of times we'll look at old things, old modules, old rules, old procedures, and we'll come up with all these reasons that we can write up in a Reddit post or on Discord or in our blogs and say, oh my gosh, this doesn't make any sense. This is goofy. This is lame. Here's how we can fix it. We can make it more real, and we can make it more relatable. We can make it whatever. But oftentimes, for whatever reason, a magic can be lost. Yes, some things are goofy, but in their goofiness, they work. Yes, some things are not realistic, but in that lack of realism, whatever you want to call it, that lack of believability, it works. And when we tie it too closely to our world, stops working. Sure, there are some procedures that maybe can speed things up or make things more dynamic, but sometimes the end result is more of a mess. And something, again, is lost. Now, I'm not saying never to change anything. Look, on my channel, I've got a bunch of videos where I'm changing all kinds of stuff. It makes me wonder if sometimes we blindly chase something just for the sake of chase. Or this is too goofy, or this is not whatever, so I need to change it because of that. And maybe what we really should be doing is looking a little bit downstream and saying, okay, maybe this is goofy, but does that goofy add something in? Does that goofiness help? Now, of course, some of the stuff you can't know without testing, and which is fine. That's what home games and everything are for. We bring ideas, we test them, we keep the ones we love, ditch the ones we don't. But maybe there's a lot of what I see in kind of the blogosphere, and a lot of things will go out of their way just to do stuff. Say, oh, look at this, it's much more realistic. And it might be, no doubt about it. But maybe just like Roadhouse 2024 is more realistic, it's not a better product, it's not a better game, it's not more fun. It's less goofy, but maybe that goofiness, maybe there's a charm to some of these things, and sometimes we don't see it until we're shown the alternative or we experience the alternative. It didn't occur to me maybe that there was some good things about some of the goofy choices in Roadhouse, but clearly in retrospect there is. Roadhouse 1989 is a movie that's obviously already lasted a long time. It's going to last a lot longer. I don't think Roadhouse 2024 is going to go very far, even though on paper it ticks off a lot of boxes that the original movie didn't tick off. And that's probably true in the RPG space as well. I just thought it was something to think about, and this movie kind of brought it to the fore. My experience viewing it brought it to the fore. Let me know what you think. Game on. Talk to you later.